Suspended as they are between East and West, NSK seemingly made a determination. No one side would ever be adequate. A comprehensive worldview required that neither hemisphere be denied, just as neither be wholly accepted. No matter how intense the ideological pressure, the truth of their specific historical condition could only include both sides of the story. And suspicion of history must be matched by a profound ambivalence about any single mythology, iconography, or political system. Only in this way could an artistic project, defined as a state in time, chart an autonomous course. The famous Slovenian architect Jože Plečnik, active at the end of the Habsburg era, once said the following: "Of course we have our own culture. It's just that we have to look for it in Germany, France and Italy." At the end of a century in which the border between East and West crossed Slovenia 5 times, that list of influences has expanded considerably. Maybe this is why postmodernism, with its endless appropriations, came along as something the Slovenes had already understood, as part of their national fabric. More importantly, in a culture marked by successive periods of denial of one or another side of history, Irvin's work represents a voluntary endorsement of outside influences. In New York, these influences are once again visible as building blocks of the recombinant Slovene identity.
When I walked in here today, I sort of glanced at one of the paintings on the wall, and all of a sudden there was the ghost of Vasarely as a kind of patterned background on it. And mixed in with that, there are remnants of Beuys and LAIBACH and Duchamp and all the kitsch Slovenian images that Irwin members probably grew up with, and all the pictures they probably saw in church. It's not about so much the old idea of what things should look like. And when I say old, I mean modern. Well, I don't think you can tell who did which work. I mean, they're not separate identities. And they say that they get rid of the idea of the author. When you get rid of the author in a country which, at the time that I first saw their work and when they first started doing it several years before that, was a totalitarian communist society, it's very different than getting rid of the author in a society that's based on individuality and the individual.
Not surprisingly, NSK's authorless distillations of an East-West cultural schizophrenia have not always been well understood or liked at home. And the prevailing political climate has inevitably played a role in this. Before Slovenia's first democratic elections, a perception existed that NSK was producing a fascistic or right-wing art. Later, their use of Eastern modernist images resulted in their being directly accused of working for the discredited communists.
Well, it's hard to say the collapse of communism makes them less relevant, because they look relevant in a different way right now, since the various ethnic groups in Yugoslavia are kind of in the midst of a war and trying to kill each other. And so suddenly their work, instead of the relation to the old politics, I can start looking at their work in terms of it's full of conflicting pasts. I mean, it's full of nationalistic imagery, international modern art imagery, old religious imagery, and I mean, it's almost as if they internalize this conflict that's happening now, or anticipated it or something.
Ja, jest najpierw.
The East collapsed because it blindly believed Western utopian ideas of freedom of the individual. The West, on the other hand, survived because through its corporate logic, it discreetly introduces a system of unconscious collective non-freedom. The collapse of communism no longer means a permanent triumph of classical capitalism. In its core, capitalism has a tendency towards self-destruction. The fundamental self-destructive substance of capitalism and its driving force is greed. It is a characteristic of greed that it only appeases its hunger when it destroys itself.
Serbian state-controlled TV. Years before fighting erupted, a relentless tape loop of 50-year-old war crimes, including the forced baptism of Orthodox Serbs by a Catholic priest in Croatia's notorious Jasenovac death camp, flickered in millions of Serbian living rooms every night. It was in Serbia that communism made its first, but not last, postmodern transition to a televisual fascism. It began as a return of the repressed. The century had vanished into the archives, but the archives came to life again, releasing stored demons in prime time. Slovenia reacted to events in the south with a kind of pragmatic rebirth of national feeling. Slovenian secessionists were given a massive boost by the Yugoslav National Army's clumsy political trial of 4 Ljubljana journalists in 1988. A rally in Congress Square pounded some final nails into the coffin of Yugoslav unity. The proceedings bore an eerie resemblance to those of 70 years before, in which the first Yugoslav state was announced in a shower of hope and goodwill.